Good morning and welcome to Be Growth Driven. We are on episode 27 and we have a good friend, a guest here, Michael Glover. And we're talking about,
going?
Good morning, Michael. How are you doing? Thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah, no problem.
So today we're talking about automation or automating and streamlining processes. It's, I think, a critical component for businesses today. I think every business has challenges with this. I know we've had challenges with that. I'm sure you have too, but you see that probably on a scale that a lot of folks have not seen it. I think after I've gotten to know you, just the number of businesses that you interact with, that you're in touch with. But first of all, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are. Tell us a little bit about who Michael Glover is.
Okay. So I'm Michael Glover. I'm based out here in Phoenix, Arizona area. We also are in Miami, and we bounce back and forth depending on business and probably weather. But yeah, so I'm here with my wife and my 4 sons. My oldest is 9 and my youngest is 1. And so I love being a dad and a husband, and I'm a big family man. And so a lot of my business has to do with that also. We are a family office, and what that is we deal with a lot of high net worth individuals, and we train families on, generational wealth, how to handle money, legal structures, and nonprofits, family foundations. How do you, leave not just a legacy, but a dynasty? And so that's a lot of what we do. I used to work in my parents' business that's in aerospace manufacturing, and I was an aerospace auditor, and I'd actually go around the country and audit different companies, some that you probably even heard of, and go over their process, their quality process. How do they deal with customers? How do they automate? How do they support their client base and whatnot? And so that translates now into the other businesses that I run and the other businesses that I help with their process and identifying bottlenecks and streamlining things. So, and the other businesses that I help.
Sorry about that little feedback.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Go ahead.
No, that's pretty much it. So I'm primarily working with 4 different companies right now. One is called The Offices, and that does the big scope of things. Legacy Global, which is our nonprofit. And then also Copper Key Group, which is our business venture and real estate investments, and Paramount Leadership. So
Interesting. Okay, so now each of those kind of represent the multiple entities, don't they? I believe the offices, right?
Yeah,
so it's
I
not
think
just...
under Legacy we have maybe 10 other entities underneath that, and so yeah, it can get pretty complicated.
So, I mean, this is why, your focus on automating and streamlining processes is it's like if you didn't have that.
Oh, yeah. We absolutely have to have that. Definitely have a process in place if it's not automated. Automation can be a little difficult because you think you have it set and it's on autopilot and you just hit go. Mm-hmm. But if you're not watching it, you're not waiting to see where's the hiccup, where's the disconnect. And so we do a lot of that also, is making sure that process is still flowing well. And so yeah, it's definitely absolutely important.
Where do you see when you're working with businesses, where do you see like the biggest, like one big challenge of where they fail to automate?
Customer experience. A lot of times we get in our own minds and our own heads, and we're in the trenches already, and we can't see the bigger picture of where the customer is flowing. I always like to think of it as like a satellite view. If you're walking down the road, you can't see the path. And so we try to think of where that path is going to go, but unless you have that, 30,000 foot view of where the customer journey begins and where it ends, and how do you keep supporting them after that? A lot of times companies can't get out of their own situation to kind of see where it is. The automation a lot of times benefits the company and not so much the customer.
So if a company was trying to implement this customer experience, is there like some first questions that if you were consulting a company, what would you tell them where to start?
Yeah, a process map for sure. A lot of times it could be just a napkin drawing of, hey, where does the customer first interact with you? And it could be through ads or whatever, or it can be, when the first conversation that a person has with a customer.
Right.
And so you have to identify where is the customer first touched by our organization, and where do you want to start this process. And then when you start drawing out that process flow, then you can kind of get a bigger view of where things go. But then once you apply it, that's where you're really going to see how things flow.
See where the breaks are. Basically, you're looking for where I always give clients an example when we're talking to them about, funnels and marketing and process, right? It's like,
Yeah,
we don't know. Sometimes when we're creating something completely new, we have an idea of what it should look like, but you don't know until you start flowing something over it. But then you need to be able to be willing to react.
exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so a lot of times, especially like in aerospace, for example, we would look at customer complaints,
Okay.
And what we call nonconformities in the aerospace industry. And that can be in the form of any kind of feedback that you get from your client. It could be an email, it could be a phone conversation, any kind of feedback that you get from your client. You want to see where is that hiccup, and is it a consistent hiccup within that process? And if it's a consistent hiccup, then something needs to change. If it's just a one-off and you're just getting one of those customers that likes to complain, it's not something that you really have to deal with a whole lot, maybe just for that particular client. But if you see it constantly happening, your process needs to change.
Awesome. Okay. Real simple, basic stuff, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Sometimes people, especially with automation, they try to make it super complicated. They have all these if then branches going off in their automation. But honestly, if you try to keep it simple, that's really where the difficulty lies, is keeping it simple. Is it simple enough for you can explain it to some newbie that just came in and they can understand it, real quick? That's a good process.
Right. Makes sense. Makes
Yeah.
sense. What would be like another area, like second step? So first, customer experience. What would you suggest would be like the next area? This is something that you've gone deep into, especially with the offices, with Legacy Global.
Mm-hmm.
You have all these entities; they all need to function a certain way,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see like a second area? So customer experience, is it? What would be the next one? Would that be internal?
Yes, absolutely. So employee experience. And so we will often conduct surveys of our employees of how they perceive the company. Does the company care about your situation? Are we striving to make a good work experience for you? Do you feel safe at work? Do you feel like, management has your best interest at heart? What are some things we're doing well? What are some things that we're not doing well? And the good thing about the employee survey is you can get a lot better response from your employees than you would from your clients. You send out a mass email to all your clients, you might get 5% to actually respond, or
Right.
10%, something like that. But your employees, they're eager to tell you exactly what you're doing wrong. So,
Right.
so definitely internal, and seeing how the employees are being treated. You always look at that meme that says, what's that saying? What if we don't invest in our employees? Or what if we invest in our employees and we give them training and then they up and leave?
Right.
Then what if we don't and then they stay? And
Right.
so you kind of have to have that mentality of, you want to also treat your employees well, because if you treat your employees well, they're going to treat your customers well.
Right. And then that's again, it's one of those common sense. Where do you see where businesses fail the most there?
Where businesses fail,
Yeah. What's where do they get caught up on it? I mean, because that's what usually happens. They get kind of caught up on the whole matter.
yeah, they kind of just, you see the surveys as maybe a checkbox. The problem is with these employees, not the upper management, right? That's where they get caught up. Maybe it's an ego thing, of, well, I've run, so many companies and I've been successful and all that kind of stuff. What are these employees telling me what to do? And so being as a leader, you have to be humble enough to see your own flaws when they're brought to you, and being able to adjust. And then realize that it's not just you, it's an entire team. You have to have that team atmosphere.
Right. Get everybody involved on the process.
Right.
Okay. I love it. I love it. Well, tell us. I mean, tell us a little bit about your businesses. So, for privately held companies,
Hmm.
real estate, estate planning, those types of things, right?
Hmm.
Like you said, legacy wealth, planning, or generational wealth planning.
Yep.
Tell us a
So
little bit about the mission, the vision of those companies.
so our main logo or our main slogan is "Live well, leave a legacy," and trademarked everything. But Legacy Global is something unique and special because it's a nonprofit. And I hate it when they say we're a nonprofit because it sounds like you don't make any money, right? Um,
Right.
but it's actually what we're the industry is now moving more towards a for impact organization rather than a nonprofit organization.
Right.
So we deal a lot with individuals and businesses that want to make an impact. Sometimes it's because people want, a tax deduction or something like that.
Right.
And that can happen maybe the first time, but most of the time when they make that first donation, they get the endorphins from giving back and making an impact, and now they're hooked. It's called the love rush in the industry. Is you get that rush of endorphins going through you, and now you want to give more and you want to have a bigger impact. And so legacy, where our specialty is we deal with complex giving. So people think of giving to a nonprofit, they think, yeah, I'll give money, and money is like the least donated item like ever. It's like less than 8% of what's donated to charity is cash in the entire world.
Wow. Okay. That's actually a really startling. So what's the biggest thing donated?
Assets, so real estate, business interest, anything anything that you can have value on can be
Right.
donated. And so a lot of what we have, for example, can be business interest, real estate, and those can be a little bit more complicated because if you are, for example, selling off a business and you have a large capital gains tax coming, we have to work with CPAs and attorneys and all that kind of stuff to um, help them show, how much of the business are they going to donate to charity, and then when they sell off the business, they get a big tax deduction to offset those capital gains.
Right.
And so we deal a lot with that, and it can be fun.
Okay.
Definitely,
Well,
every deal is different.
what's the most, for what you can talk about, like what's the most interesting deal you've come across, like the most bizarre?
The most bizarre,
Yeah.
elephants is the most bizarre.
Elephants.
Yeah. So we had a donor in California.
Okay.
He has a special place in his heart for elephants, especially those that are in the logging industry over in India.
Okay.
And he wanted to rescue some elephants, and so we helped him rescue one and run a Thai elephant home in Thailand,
Oh,
where
interesting.
where the elephant now lives, and she's actually had a couple babies, and so now there's four that we help over there, and they're kind of like in this like nice little sanctuary area where they're taken care of, and we get to go visit and see how they're doing and things like that. So donating a live animal or making your donation go in and affect live animals is interesting. We've also donated used cars from the United States over to Liberia,
Okay.
and that was more complicated than it probably needed to be because when you cross borders, it can get super complicated,
Right. Right.
But managing how to do that was interesting. It was easier to do the elephants than it was the cars.
Interesting. Interesting. I think you were when we had dinner the other night. I think you were talking
Yeah.
about that, the elephant
Yeah.
house, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And on our YouTube video, you can see my sister. My sister-in-law is actually over there quite a bit. She goes over there maybe once every other year to
Okay.
visit, and on our YouTube channel, you can actually see her talking with Leslie, who is the donor, and then Maynoi is the elephant, and she comes and they feed her and they talk about her, and you can see the scars on the elephant from when they would whip and beat the elephant. She has scars on the top of her head
Oh,
because
wow.
she was beat with a machete once, and so it's kind of dramatic and sad to see that the elephants go through that, but it's nice to see that thriving really well. And she's pretty young. Elephants live a long time. They live as
Right.
long as humans. And so she's I think she's less than 30. And so Maynoi had I can't remember her baby's name. I think it's Taynoi, I think, but I think she's 5 or 6.
Very cool. Well, and
So
they have just a phenomenal memory. So I would imagine that, you know, it's elephants as a creature are just majestic animals.
yeah, they're
And
pretty
so
cool.
it's so cool that you guys were able to do that and really work with that, that individual that wanted to, that was their passion evidently,
Yeah.
to see that come to fruition.
Yeah, and working with people when they're passionate, it's amazing. It's very fulfilling, and you see them and they give their all, and you get to be a part of their success because we help them, build a foundation for themselves. Legacy in particular, we we help families that maybe they don't want to start a 501c3 entity right away, but they want to get started somehow and they don't know how.
Right.
And when you're part of a nonprofit board, you're liable for everything the nonprofit does. And so if someone in your nonprofit is laundering money, they're going to go to jail. But then you as a board member are going to be questioned on how come you didn't catch that kind
Right.
of thing. And so they come under our umbrella, under our 501c3, and we teach them. They become council members to their program, and we teach them how to run meetings. We teach them what you can and cannot do in the nonprofit space. And a lot of times they're wanting to work with their for-profit business and their nonprofit together, right? And
Right.
so how do you make it to where there's not what's called private endearment? Double dipping is you get a tax deduction, but also you benefit from it again. The IRS doesn't like that. They think they want your tax deduction to be your benefit, and that's it. And so
Right.
we show them how can the for-profit and nonprofit work together in a way that makes the customer's dollar stretch more. So maybe they, like Tom's Shoes. You ever hear of Tom's Shoes?
Yeah, I've heard of Tom Shoes. Yeah.
Yeah. So his big thing when he first started out was you buy a pair, give a pair. And so
Right.
you'd buy these super comfortable shoes at double the price of what they were really going to sell for. And then he goes and donates a pair of shoes to third world countries and these kids that don't have any shoes. Right. And
Right.
so that boosted his business, his for-profit business, but he's also making a social impact as well, you know? And
I
so
love it.
that's a good example of businesses that want to, make a profit and do good, but also make some kind of social impact. And the clients, his customers, love it because they know that every time they put on their shoes, a kid somewhere is also putting on
Right.
his shoes. And
Very
so,
cool.
yeah,
That is very, very cool. I think it's what it's doing is it's really creating opportunities for businesses to kind of to think back. Maybe I don't know. You look at some businesses when they first started, the intentions were well, but maybe they just get lost in along the way. But it's they can reground that. Have you had that scenario where you have a business, they've gone gangbusters, you could say, and they realize, you know what, we've lost some of our initial direction. Let's rechannel this.
yeah. So even nonprofits, it's called mission drift, mission
Okay.
drift. And so even in the nonprofit space, you have organizations that they no longer are doing what they originally intended to do. Um, we had a client where she passed away, and the way it works, the reason why we say leave a legacy is because you can donate to a charity and be a one and done
Right.
donation, or you can donate to something called like a donor advice fund, where you donate the money, but you still have legal advisory rights to that money. You don't own the money, but you can advise on where that money goes. Okay.
Right.
So if you're going to do a large donation, let's just say it's $10,000, okay, or $1 million, or whatever it is. Charities are just like people. You give them a large amount of money all at once, and it could destroy them. They could just
Right.
go out and waste it. They can do all sorts of stuff with it, and so you sip it out, right? So if you're going to give, let's just say $1 million to charity, you don't want to give $1 million all at once. You want to sip out maybe $100,000 for 10 years,
Right.
or $1,000 for forever. um, you want to make sure that that charity that you're giving to has to earn that donation again next year.
Makes
Right.
sense. Yeah.
And we had a client who she was giving to a battered women's organization. Okay. And this organization, years after this woman had died, now her kids, those advisory rights moved to her children.
Okay.
And now the children can advise on where that money goes. And so now the children are making sure that their mother's legacy was still going to battered women. Okay. Well, this organization then started to offer payment for abortions. And no matter what your stance is on that, it would have made this woman turn over in her grave if she found out that that organization was now supporting abortions. And so we were able to stop donating to that organization and then find a similar battered women's organization and then move those donations year over year to that organization as well. And so that's kind of an example of why you'd have a donor advice fund or a fiscal sponsorship or something like that, where you can give all your money, or you can give a large amount of money and receive a tax deduction right away, but then sit that over time and make an impact not just to one organization, but you could also spread that out to multiple organizations as well.
How difficult is it for a business if they wanted to get started with something like this, or someone wanted to start doing estate planning like this? Where how difficult is it to set up?
It's not that difficult. Just kind of depends, especially with estate planning. It depends on, are there divorces in the family? Are there stepchildren? Things like that.
Right.
So, that's not too complicated to do. It just costs a little bit more to make sure that estate is done well. And, we have really good attorneys who are very good at what they do, and asset protection and things like that. And the charity part is just a piece of that entire estate plan.
Right.
But it's not that difficult. It usually takes a phone call to talk with an attorney, and then discuss what kind of your plans are, and then with the charity side of it, building your foundation. A lot of organizations like Schwab and Fidelity and things like that, you may have to have a minimum of $5,000 to $10,000 to put in the donor advice fund. But with Legacy, we are a zero requirement, so you can actually start a donor advice fund for nothing and build it up as you want to start giving and fundraise and all that kind of stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it can be very simple. It just kind of depends. Now, there are other things like charitable remainder trust, things like that can be like $5,000 to set up, because we're having to hire attorneys and things like that to specifically set up those trusts. But it's definitely great because those are split interest gifts, where you give to charity into this charitable remainder trust. You get a partial deduction and not a full deduction, and it pays you an income for the rest of your life. And so now you avoid the capital gains tax, but now when you get the income from the trust, you're taxed at the income level and not the capital gains level.
Right.
So there's a lot of different strategies with that.
So this would be something where somebody would set up this instrument, for lack of a better way to say it. They're able to then make donations from, let's say, for instance, their main company, their main business to that. It's a write-off for the business, but then this has the ability to then also serve them while they're alive, and then thereafter remain on as a legacy.
Correct. That's why it's called a remainder. So they donate the money. Like if someone, like we had someone have 5 houses that they wanted to donate. Right. And that could come up to be a lot of money, right?
Right.
There's a lot of capital gains too, because, if you inherit real estate, there's a step up in basis, and there's a lot of talk right now about getting rid of that step up in basis, and you'll be taxed on what the property is actually worth. But that's beside the point. But you can donate that amount of money, liquidate it and everything, and it will pay you. So we actually invest the money. We've invested into Cardone Capital with one donor. We've invested into farmlands. We've invested into stocks, bonds, whatever the donor really wants, because on a charitable trust, they actually have rights to see where it goes and gets invested. And then they can choose whether it's a minimum of 5% returns on that investment as income. And they can choose whether that's a monthly distribution, an annual, biannual, or a quarterly distribution.
Right.
all within the trust. But it's kind of like a one and done kind of thing. Once you have it set up, it's done, and you can't make changes to it. And so
Right.
sometimes you have to have a second, depending
Right.
on. But
Would
then
that,
once, go ahead.
I was gonna say, would that be considered what's called like an irrevocable, like
Hmm.
kind of like an irrevocable trust, right?
Right, kind of, but it's a charitable trust because
Right.
now that you've given it to charity, it's gone.
Right.
You
It's
know,
gone.
and then you're getting a deduction. So you're getting something in return, but you're also getting income at a more tax or a more taxable or a more favorable tax rate than what you probably would have had.
Very cool. Very cool.
And
So, I
so,
mean,
yeah,
there's a lot of advantages there. Someone obviously they need to build their business up to make sense of that.
yeah,
Um, it's one of those things probably at the right time, right place, right time scenarios.
correct.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. There's definitely a right time to do it. We have a couple of clients who they just want to they want to give, and
Right.
so they started donor advice fund to start out, and that's pretty much just a grant making machine where you can put some money in, get a deduction, but then also go out and fund missions or
Right.
something like that. Mhm.
Okay. And I mean, it's all at the end of the day, a lot of businesses, they start their business with good intentions. They need to grow their business. And that's where we were kind of, starting the basis of our conversation
Uh-huh.
today with automation, automating processes,
Hmm.
because those are like one of the key components for just a business to grow. If they can't scale, they're never going to have some of these other funds like what we're talking about that they'll be able to use then in some of these other ways to really advance their goal, their mission in life.
Hmm. Hmm.
Which, I mean,
Yeah, and so coming from a business aspect, there's a term called impact investing. And so if you build your business, for example, in an opportunity zone, there's a lot of
okay,
benefits for things like that. And sometimes you can even call it conscious capitalism, where as you're building your business, you're also making some kind of impact to the community, and people want to do business with you because they also want to make an impact. Everybody has kind of a a sense about them that they want to be remembered for something, or they want to impact someone
right,
in some way. They want to have meaning, they want to have purpose. And so when they do business with somebody, in a recent podcast we did with Tiffany House, she is the owner of the Gift Planning Institute. And so we worked together a little bit, but she was actually going over statistics on people are giving less to religious organizations and churches and giving more to businesses that are doing social impact. And
interesting.
so a lot of times, when you're at the checkout line and they're like, "Hey, do you want to round up your dollar to go to the Red Cross or Phoenix Children's Hospital or some other charity?" Right? That's because that grocery store is doing some kind of social impact initiative that's going to benefit them, because you don't get the deduction for the 50 cents that you're rounding up, right? The company does. The company gets a
Right,
tax write off because they're taking that 50 cents and donating it to a tax exempt organization. So very smart for the grocery stores to do
right,
that, because they're doing a social impact. People get that love rush when they do
right.
it, and they feel good about shopping at that grocery store because they're also supporting something that you might agree with.
Makes sense. Makes complete sense. I love it. I love it. There's so much opportunities out there just in general.
Oh
What
yeah.
and really, it's like this allows you then to, as a, like, if you're a business owner and you want to do this, like we already have one of our good friends in here, Joe Camacho.
Hmm.
He wants to connect with you there. If you see the
For sure.
comment right there, two opportunities. So, I mean, if you're a business owner and you're like, hey, listen, I've been running this for-profit business, you want to start making impact. Number one, as you want to continue to grow that business, automating your processes step by step, some of the basic things that even Michael touched on, your customer experience, your employee experience.
Hmm.
Obviously, the employee experience is going to feed right back into customer experience.
Yeah.
You know, as that customer continues their journey. But then that's going to create you obviously to grow. Now, let's get into, what's your passion, and
Yeah.
how can you not only give to your passion, but then also benefit from that passion too. There's still opportunity to benefit in that respect. Like what you mentioned, one of those opportunities where it can keep paying you back,
Yeah.
as a dividend.
Yeah,
Um,
and what's great about those distributions is you can choose to either take it as income or you can redonate it and get another deduction. And
Interesting.
so just kind of depends on if you need the income or if you don't. And
Right.
so, but as a business, having that process has to flow over into the nonprofit space too, and then once you feel like you have that process down, then I think is the time to automate that process and make sure that the automation continues to work. Every day is changing,
Right.
and technology changes. Apple just released that update to where now they can't really track you as well, as far as what you're buying, or I don't understand. You probably understand that way better than I do. But as far as tracking what I like to eat or where I go to grocery stores or something like that, and it
Right.
betters my ad experience and all that. So how does that affect you have to ask yourself, as the world changes, as technology progresses, how does that change the automation? How can I either better the automation, better the process, or does it interrupt it? And I have to adjust and pivot, because you have to pivot really in business. You have
Right.
to pivot almost every day.
Right. And I think some people fail to realize like how quickly they do have to do that.
Yeah.
They kind of get paralyzed oftentimes, as far as what's next, what to do next, what's priority. And they what I always kind of see is it's like more time gets added thinking about it than it would have taken
Mhm.
to actually just simply do it,
Yeah.
find out if the process worked or not. Then I think one of the other things, and maybe chime in on this too, Michael, is like a lot of times people say, "Well, we tried a process, it failed."
Yeah. We've tried that before. It didn't work. Let's do
Yeah,
something else, right?
yeah. What do you think's the cause of that? I mean, what's your
You
like?
know, I've seen that a lot. I've seen that a lot. Where hey, we have this idea. Hey, we tried that before. It didn't work. And a lot of times it's because maybe the right people were not there yet. Maybe the time was not right.
Right,
Um, and so if the timing is different, then you may want to try it again with maybe just a few little tweaks, because it's that little tweak that might just make it work, and it may work even better than you expected it.
right,
And so I think a lot of times as business owners, I run into it all the time in manufacturing is, hey, why don't we try it like this? Oh, we've tried that. It didn't work. Let's move on to something else and try and figure out something else from scratch. Like, why are we trying something else from scratch when, the process worked up until this point and then it failed?
right.
Let's identify the bottleneck. Let's identify the what's going on and see if we can pivot that and then keep going.
Yeah. Well, what you may find out is it's failing right here because a small tweak to this process over here down the line, which appeared to work,
Hmm.
one small tweak makes this work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So um,
Absolutely.
it,
Absolutely.
it's some of the simple things. I like what Joe said. If you're too big for the small things, you're too small for the big things.
Oh,
Um,
dude, I like that.
that's like that needs to be like on a wall or something like that, Joe. That's
Yeah.
like quote board worthy or iconic. I think one of the iconic pictures, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think I'm going to take that, actually. I'm going to put that somewhere.
yeah. Michael's gonna go ahead and patent that, trademark that, right? I love it. Now on Michael's store, only $99.
Yeah.
So what got you started into this? What's the drive behind you? Where did you have a passion for all of this?
Yeah. So I guess it all really started. I volunteered in San Francisco for a few years, and I saw a lot of people struggling with things. It was primarily in San Francisco, in the city, but in that whole Bay Area, we were all over the place, teaching Spanish, teaching English, helping Alcoholics Anonymous, translating and things like that,
Mhm.
and seeing people change for the better, and just trying, and it was a hard process for people to get off, substance abuse or just abuse in general. A lot of times they
Right.
had, um, hard pasts and tragic things happen to them, and going in and helping them with that as a volunteer, where I actually had to pay to go, and things. It opened my eyes to a world that I didn't know really existed. I'm kind of like in this like bubble shelter in, the Phoenix area of Arizona, and I'm thinking everything's great, but you go to San Francisco and it's worse than some third world countries. And and so if that can happen in my own backyard, I want to be making an impact. And so when I got back from the volunteer experience, I was a manager at a university, and that was fun and all. It was the sales process. I like sales. I think it's great. I think
Right.
you can definitely make a lot with sales, and I got into the groove of being able to talk to anyone about anything in English, Spanish, and Portuguese.
Oh, wow.
And my Portuguese has slipped big time. My Spanish is, I'm holding on to it hard. Like, I'm trying as best as I can.
Right.
Um, I actually speak more Spanish in Florida than I do in Arizona, which is
Interesting.
interesting.
It's one of those, if you don't use it, you lose it type of a thing, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, you definitely will lose it. And your mouth actually is a muscle, obviously. And so being able to speak it, you have to be able to read it out loud and train your mouth to speak all that kind of stuff. Um, but anyways, I digress. But then when an opportunity came up from my in-laws, actually, where they started this charity in 2001, and they saw how easy it was for me to just talk to anybody, and so they brought me in to my actual title is the director of estate and gift planning. And so I go in and I talk to people about what they're wanting to do. I build relationships with people and see what their passion is, and then show them the way of how that can actually benefit them and how to do it. Because a lot of people say, I want to make this impact, or I want to help
Mhm.
X, Y, and Z, but I just don't know how to do it. And they think they have to
Right.
have millions of dollars saved up in order to make an impact. And we're not super wealthy in any degree. So I have 4 little boys. So we started Glover Charities. Okay, it's our own like little baby right now.
Right.
But we go and volunteer time to other charities locally within the foster care system. My sister has adopted 5 kids out of the foster care system, and I mentor kids that are 16 to 21. Um, because if you read the stats on foster care, it would shock you. Half of foster care kids that age out of the system will be homeless within 2 years.
Wow.
And so that's a passion of mine. And so I go out and donate time. We donate some money as well, but primarily time, because these foster kids, for example, every adult that's in their life right now is paid to be with them, and that has a psychological effect on
Imagine.
these
Yeah.
kids. And so when you go in and you volunteer your time and you're not being paid to be there, there's a lot of pushback at first, because they want to see, they're testing you if you're gonna bail on them like everybody else has.
Right.
But once they see that they don't, the statistics are drastically different when they have someone who actually gives a crap
Right.
about them,
Yeah.
without having to be paid to be there. And so they start their own businesses, or they go to trade school, which I think is completely underrated. I think trade school is amazing, and you can make a lot of money in trade, better than most degrees can give you in college. And so, seeing that difference in people when their life changes, when they see that impact, they get that love rush. That's really kind of what got me into the whole thing, is being
Interesting.
able to make an impact that way.
Very cool. Very cool. And then you've just stayed on that path, and look at what's created, right? So I think
Yeah.
I think there's like a few things that we can just even pull from that. Just like when you have that mission in mind of where you want to go, and the why,
And the why.
right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just
And the why is super important, because sometimes, it's going to hit the fan and things
right.
are going to go wrong. And that why has got to be there with you, and then also people who you do business with. You have to align. No matter how good a deal is, if you can't trust your business partners, it's a bad deal. It's a bad deal.
Right.
No matter how much money you could make, guaranteed, whatever that's going to be, right?
Uh-huh.
If you don't have a good foundation of people who have a good enough why to push them through
Right.
when things go bad, it's a bad deal.
Right.
big time.
I think that's what you and I both see a lot of businesses day in and day out. And I think that's like, that why has to be the underlying driver. It doesn't mean that things won't happen, but what that why is, I kind of think of it as like what keeps the boat tilted back up again.
Absolutely.
The boat's going to go this way or that way. It's
Mhm.
that even, what's the phrase? The even, an even keel, right?
Yeah.
So, it's keeping the boat upright. We're all
Yeah.
going to get sloshed around. That happens.
Yep.
But
You're always gonna have that rogue wave come over and just hit you blindside.
yeah,
And it's something that you feel like you try and plan, and you have this process and you have this automation, and you try to see everything that's going to come, and no one knows what's going to come. Who would have thought the pandemic was going to hit the way it did?
right,
And then people had to make major pivots because they didn't have a contingency plan for having to move everything online or whatever. And
right.
so and then I'll tell you a story real quick about
Yeah,
my why. As I was in a capital raising meeting, and I was asked, hey, what's your why? And I hear this a lot of times, and I said, well, I want to support my family. I want to teach them good principles, so that they can govern themselves and leave an impact for themselves. I want them to have purpose.
right,
They said, oh, that's great. That's a great why for you, but that sounds very selfish. Yeah, and everybody wants that. Everyone wants to support their families. Everyone wants to do well for themselves, but it's got
right.
to go bigger than that. How is that impacting other people? Why would I, as an investor, invest in somebody who's only in it for them and their family?
Right.
Right. And so when capital raising, for example, you want to talk about, I want that for my family, but I also want that for my neighbors, and I want that for my business owners in my community, and I want to be able to provide
Right.
people within my community something better. And so now it's more about a community of people, or
Right.
I want to be able to give good returns to my investors.
Right. It's got to be deeper.
It's got to be deeper.
Yeah. You got to kind of dig down, because it's like, yeah, you want it for your family, but why do you want it for your family?
Right. Who
Well,
doesn't want it for their family?
yeah.
What
Well,
does that make? How does that make you different?
right. So, but I think when you break it down, it's like, well, why do you want it for your family? Well, I want my family to be happy. Well, what contributes to your family being happy? Well, a good
Yeah.
neighborhood. All right. So
Yeah.
the neighborhood has to be good too. Wouldn't you agree? All right. So if the neighborhood to be good, the community's got to be good.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. We when I was little, we moved out of Utah because my dad was smoking a ton, and he worked in the nuclear manufacturing industry, and
Okay.
was told that his lung capacity was diminishing so fast he was going to be dead within the next,
Wow.
5-10 years if he didn't quit smoking. And so we moved down to Arizona for him to quit cold turkey, because every time he tried to quit smoking, people would always want to give him free cigarettes.
Interesting. Okay.
Oh, poor guy, you don't have a cigarette. Here, let me give you one.
Right. Right.
So we moved down to Arizona. He quit cold turkey. It took him years before he could be around anyone who smoked, and we lived in the worst neighborhood that you could think of. We got robbed a couple times. It was awful, and so my dad worked extremely hard to make sure that we had a better living, so that we could move into those neighborhoods that were better, that were not
Okay.
gang ridden. And so I definitely think giving to a community and letting families feel that security is absolutely important. If you want to be successful, you've got to surround yourself with people who are successful also.
Right.
So you want to be in a community where it's not a gang community, but a giving community. And so that's absolutely important, especially if you're going to go in and invest in a business or a community or something like that. You want to make sure you're setting that up in the correct locations.
Makes sense. Well, and it goes again, just simply back to the proximity of the right people.
Yeah.
You're not going to, like you mentioned with the example of your father, him smoking. He's not going to quit smoking if he keeps getting offered.
Right. He's not going to quit smoking if he's around smokers all day.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Just like someone that's an alcoholic. Hey, you're not going to stop if you keep going to the bar.
That's
But
right.
they have great fries. Okay, you can get fries elsewhere.
The wings, the chicken wings are amazing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I go for the wings. It's just the wings. I just so happen to have another beer, right?
Right.
So it's one of those things. It's all of these things I think that people need to think about when they're growing their business. And it really kind of like going back to our original topic, automating and streamlining processes, right? To get the
Mhm.
right information, you be around the right people. And you and I met through the 10X network. We met
Yep.
actually at one of the workshops, and it's getting around those right people because you see businesses going through some of the same struggles, some of the same challenges, and
Mhm.
you're like, you know what, I had that same problem. Here's how I solved it, and it worked. And so that's like such a beautiful thing. You're getting around the right people, and you're getting the right information, and all of a sudden that little tweak just makes a vast difference,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And it's important to think at just because a process may work for you, it may not work for someone else. But what
Right.
is always consistent is the principle. The
Right.
principle will always be the same, but the method may be different. And the method will always be changing depending on who's doing it, where they're doing it at, what industry that they're in. But the principle is always the same.
Right. Right. Very straightforward. Very
Yeah.
straightforward. I love it. Well,
Yeah.
Michael, what's next? What's big and next for you?
Well, that is the question. We're trying to do a lot more in Miami to try and expand a lot more. We travel a lot to different states and different countries. I think the next big thing is we're trying to cross, the $1 billion threshold, which will probably happen in the next few years as we have this generational transfer of wealth. It's the largest transfer of wealth in history, and so people are giving a lot to charity upon their death, and we get to be a part of that, and help them leave their legacy to these the next generation.
Right.
The biggest fear that they have though is that how is this going to affect them? Is it going to destroy them? We've had
Right.
you can look up many stories of grandma dying and leaving their grandson to $10 million,
Right.
and grandson goes out and buys this really fancy fast car, and then the next day wraps it around a pole and he's gone too.
Right.
And so if you really want to destroy your generational line, you give them a ton of money without any kind of preparation. So what's great about charity, and we've done this a couple of times, but you teach your children, you teach the next generation the value that money has. And this is part of, you talk about business, we talk about nonprofits. Now this is the family right here, right?
Right.
And it can be it could be your cousins, it could be your friends, whatever you consider family. But we have a plan, a process that, for example, my kids, by the time that they're 12, they become junior advisors to our charity, and they'll actually have a say on where some money will go and donate to. But they have to present to us. They actually have to have a pitch deck, something like like we've seen it where some kids have like a trifold poster board.
Uh-huh.
My charity,
Right.
my donation. This is what they do. This is why this is important to me. This is why I want to give money to this charity. And so right now the senior advisors for our personal charity is just me and my wife. So we're having this family council, right?
Right.
And we'll approve their donation, and then surprise to them, they get to go work with that charity for a year.
Very
And
cool.
they get to see the impact that the money has. It also holds the charity accountable because they know my kid is involved. So I'm going
Right.
to watch kind of carefully how things are
Right.
going. And then a year later, they come back. We have another family council, or however often you want to run family councils. It could be weekly, even, or
Right.
quarterly, or whatever. They come back and they present. This is how the money was used, and I want to give again, or I suggest another charity to go
Right.
to.
Maybe the
Right?
charity didn't live up to its
Maybe.
you know, what it was supposed to do, or whatever the
Right.
case may
Or
be.
or
Yeah.
maybe the impact wasn't as great, or something, or maybe they dissolved and they lost their tax status, or
Right.
something. But what that does is, but as they grow year over year, 12, 13, 14, 15, all the way up to where they're 18, they now have not only stacked their resume with volunteer things, which people love, they're also able to see the impact that money can have, the responsible thing to do with money. They respect it a little bit more so that they're able to reach certain milestones. And when they reach certain milestones, they get a little bit more, right?
Interesting. Okay.
So a lot of times in an estate plan, you can actually say, when my son or when my daughter does X, Y, and Z, release this amount of money.
Right.
Right. There's a movie called The Ultimate Gift. Have you ever seen it?
No, I've not. No. Now it's going to be on my
I
list.
can't
Though.
hear you. Hold on.
Can you hear me now?
Okay. So there's a movie called The Ultimate Gift. You
Okay.
can still hear me, right?
Yep, I can hear you. Yep.
Okay. I can't hear you for some reason. Okay.
Let's see here. Those that are listening, give us a
But
little
anyways,
bit
Ultimate
of
Gift.
thumbs up there if we can hear. If you can hear.
It's a movie about a billionaire that dies,
Right.
and the whole movie is about how the family is fighting over the money. And he picks one grandson where he wants to give him a series of gifts, and he's the only one that for some reason he gets it. I don't want to ruin the movie for you, but it's like the gift of hard work, the gift of friendship. And there's like 7 or 10 gifts that he gets that actually help him develop the skill sets to enable to inherit the real goal. And what the real goal is,
Right.
I'll let you find that out.
All right. Now I'm
going to
have to
here with my sound real quick.
go for it. So Michael, that
Switch over.
I think is just absolutely fantastic. What you're doing with all these different things.
That's better. It's probably my earpods.
Okay.
So yeah, say that again.
I said I think it's absolutely fantastic what you're doing. We got a little bit of effect going on.
Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of the goal of what we try to do with families is how do their next generation,
right?
How does the next generation have those skill sets ready in place when they do inherit money, or when the estate does move to their trust? You have your revocable trust, and then you have the irrevocable trust. And the irrevocable usually is the kids, the next generation of things. And so making sure that they're ready to receive those kind of things, And a lot of times when people do pass wealth, it's usually when, mom and dad die when they're in 70s, 80s, and kids are already in their 60s. They've already made their own wealth. They've already made their own goals. And then the grandkids also, in their 40s, something like that. And so you want to have those principles already in place, because the time for growth is pretty much coming to, you're pretty much set in your ways by the time you're in your 50s, 60s.
Right.
So a lot of times it can be hard to break those habits if they're not good habits to begin with.
Right. Well, and it's what you're touching on there. It's important for people to start planning now. Don't wait till it's too late. By the time you finally get to that point, you're going to wish that you would have done the things that grew your business the right way, made planning to make it possible for others after you to succeed. I mean, and that's really, I mean, it's, think about your big mission, your big vision of why are you doing what you're doing? And I think a lot of people, they start to contemplate that, but they don't know where to go start. And so this has been fantastic amounts of information that you provided, Michael. Michael, what's the best way that people can get a hold of you?
They can just go to michaelglover.com.
Awesome. Real simple.
And yeah, real simple. Just go there. That's where I funnel everything through, whether it's going to be estate planning, whether it's going to be charitable planning, or real estate or business ventures. Anything like that would be going through there. But yeah, and I love the point. You don't have to have millions of dollars to start.
Right.
Having a plan is great. Understanding that the plan is going to fail is even better, and you have to adjust over time. And so always having that in mind, but always having the main goal be consistent is where you want to go.
Right. So there we put the link for everybody that's watching right now. It's the links in the comments there, michaelglover.com. So if you want to learn more about what Michael's doing, how you can get involved, how you can even look at something for you. Maybe you're in that position right now. Maybe you're a business owner. You're like, hey, we're ready to go to the next step. I need to start planning for this. I got young ones. I waited too long to do this. It's never too late. The only time that's too late is, well, when you're gone.
Yeah.
And so as long as you're still kicking it, it's still the right time to do so. So definitely.
Absolutely. And it's never too late either. And so the time to start is now, and making the plans, and then just doing, every plan is going to be different depending on the individual, depending on the family. And so we adjust.
Wonderful. Michael, thank you so much. You've given a vast amount of wisdom just from what your experience has been, the multiple companies that not only you've been a part of creating, but a part of growing, and really some of the key, basic, simple things. A lot of this just simple information that we just need to put into play because we're missing those simple little pieces. We put those into play and we see huge results from those things. So thank you very much for your time today. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed my time.
100%. And we'll see you again very soon, back down in Miami, I'm sure, or somewhere in between.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
And we'll until next time.
All
Well, everyone,
right,
thank you. Real quick, thank you for joining on Be Growth Driven today. Those that have been watching live, if you're watching the replay, throw in the comments that you're watching replay. Let us know what you took away from this episode with Michael, and if there's questions you have. I'm sure what we'll do is we'll make sure if you have questions here, if for some reason are not able to get a hold of Michael, just put the questions in the comments. We'll get them over to Michael. We'll make sure that he gets those, and we'll catch you on the next episode. So next week, actually, we have a fantastic speaker. So on May 4th, it actually will be Audrey hosting Be Growth Driven. I'm going to shift the host. We have a wonderful lady from the 10X Network, and it's going to be talking about her business, how she started. And so Audrey's going to actually take the ball on that one here. So I'll actually be heading down to Miami next week. So
awesome.
Makes it a little bit easier to shift the host on that one. And so we'll catch up, Michael, offline here in a little bit. But everyone, thank you again for jumping on Be Growth Driven today. And remember, be great because nothing else pays.